Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be sharing with you how to make a simple straight skirt with a bust contour. So starting from my margin line, I'm going to mark my waist to hip measurement, which is 8 inches. So I'm just going to mark 8 inches across and then rule a straight line. So after adding my waist to hip, I'm going to go ahead and mark my waist to knee measurement, which is 23 inches. And then I'll also go ahead and mark the desired length of my skirt. Now on this hip line, I'm going to input my hip measurement divided by 4 minus 1. And then I'm also going to mark it on my waist and knee line so that I can be able to draw a straight line. After reading my line, I'm going from my hip point, I'm going to come up by 1 inch and go down by 2 inches. Then I'm going to mark my waist measurement. Then from that point, I'm going to connect it to the first hip point I came up by 1 inch from the hip line. Now on the knee pads, I'm going to go in by 1 inch. Well, you can go in by 2 inches if you want your skirt to be like really fitted. And then I'm going to connect it to the second hip point. And then I'm just going to use my curve drill to smoothen out the edge so that it gives us that nice hip curve. So now I'm just going to go ahead and add 1 inch sewing allowance round the skirt. Well, if you're going to use a dart for this, you should also add your dart allowance. But I will not be using a dart for this particular skirt. That is why I did not add any dart allowance. But if you are using a dart, make sure you add your dart allowance. Also, for the end of the skirt, we'll be using the same knee measurement for the end of the skirt. So even if your skirt is on your ankle or on your calves, you're supposed to use the same knee measurement for it. So that is all for our front piece. I'm going to cut it out so that we'll be able to use it to create our back piece. Now for the back piece, I'm going to mark out 3 inches first before I start anything. I'm going to mark 3 inches. 2 inches will be for our zip allowance and 1 inch will be for remember the 1 inch we subtracted from the front. That 1 inch is what we will be adding to this back part of the skirt. After drawing the line, I will be using it as my starting point. Then I'm going to place my front pattern on it and trace it out just the way you see me doing it. So after tracing it out from the hip line, I'm going to come out by 1 inch. Yes, and I'll also mark my back dart on the waistline. I usually use 1 inch for my back dart. So if I mark it in, I'm also going to replace it to the side of my pattern. Now I'm going to connect from that point all the way to the 1 inch on the hip line. So I also forgot to mark out my knee point, so I'm just going to mark it out and then connect it to the 1 inch on the hip line. After drawing out the lines, I'm going to use my curved rule to smoothen out the line so that the edge will not be very sharp and the curve will be realistic. After all this, I'm going to mark out my zipper allowance round the center back line. The center back line is this line that has this butt contour, this part we came out by 1 inch. That's your center back. Now that we are done with the zip, remember the back darts, I'm going to just mark it out properly and then connect it all the way to the hip line. Yeah, that's going to be our original line. So I'm going to cross out the other one, and then that is it for our back pattern. I'm just going to cut out the unnecessary pieces. So we've come to the end of this tutorial. This is the pattern I use for most of my straight skirts, especially if I want them to fit me very well. This is the pattern I use. Anyways, thanks for sticking with me to this point. I will see you all next time. Bye.